So you remember when Scotland said it wanted to leave the United Kingdom? My first response was, good! I mean, hell, Hadrian built a wall to keep you knock-kneed Scottish pillocks out. Indeed, even if they decided to stay, I thought that the United Kingdom should have had a referendum on whether we should expel Scotland from the United Kingdom. Yeah, build up that wall. Sure, it's a sort of Trump-type solution, albeit spoken in jest. In many ways, it's a sort of similar thing with Britain's referendum on leaving the EU. And for me, I wonder if Europe has the same sense of humour, and that if Britain chooses to stay, whether they're all going to have a referendum on whether they should expel Britain from the EU. I mean, in many ways, the mere fact that you're having this referendum, just like with Scotland, kind of undermines the very essence of the whole concept of, say, a united kingdom. Voting to leave Europe, voting to leave your seat at the table, just kind of splits the very concept of a united Europe. I mean, America had a similar sort of deal with this sort of thing. When the South decided it wanted to leave, it was going to secede and keep its slaves, which is what, of course, led to the Civil War, a war which killed more Americans than any other in history. Now, naturally, if this was some smaller bit player, like, say, for instance, Norway, then you could probably make something like the Brexit work, and it wouldn't be such a big deal. I mean, hell, more people live in London than in Norway. But this is Britain talking about leaving the EU, one of the largest pieces. Damn straight, that's going to destabilise things. Now, don't get me wrong, I could create an absolute devil's sermon on the inefficiencies of the European Union and how the path to hell can truly be lined with the best bureaucratic intentions. Oh, thank you, Europe. Now I need a screwdriver to change the bloody battery pack. But then again, Britain's political system is pretty farcical itself.
Order! Miss Order! 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 Order, I say to the Children's Minister, try to calm down and behave like an adult, and if you can't, if it's beyond you, leave the chamber, get out, we'll manage without you.
I mean, let's not forget that there aren't many countries who can boast that they elected a Prime Minister who allegedly defiled a dead pig. Oh, that old boys network, so quintessentially British, the very essence of British leadership. So upper class, so aristocratic, so very, very stupid. Now, this really isn't about whether Europe is a farce or whether Britain's politics are a farce. It's about what's the best option on the table for Great Britain. For me, it's a simple costs-benefits analysis. What are the costs and what are the benefits? Well, primarily, the European Union is a trading bloc. That trading bloc has rules. Maybe England is slightly better off on the inside, maybe slightly better off on the outside. And people argue over those small differences. But the one thing that you're guaranteed of, and this is something that almost no one has highlighted, is going to be a gargantuan pain in the arse for everyone. New rules will have to be written and negotiated with everybody. And then everybody who actually trades with the UK is going to have to learn those new rules. It's a colossal waste of time, effort, and money. This is why people like Obama were against Britain leaving. It's a disruption for everybody in the entire world who currently trades with Britain. I mean, damn, this was the whole bloody idea of the common market in the first place. I mean, what the hell are you thinking? You're basically just changing from one perfectly functioning set of rules to another. And notably, this doesn't screw over anyone in Europe. They all have the same trading rules with everyone else in the world. It's only Britain who has to struggle with this self-inflicted wound of having the burden to renegotiate all of these agreements. And that change is what's going to cost the money. However, a lot of people are worried about immigration. And yeah, I share your concerns. It's not so much the people, but some of the ideas and cultures that they bring. But then again, England already has border controls, unless you're going to impose some sort of visa requirements on the entire of Europe, which would be kind of pointless unless you've got a competent intelligence service that can successfully screen out all of the problems. And let's be real, the intelligence service has had limited success in stopping homegrown Islamic terrorist attacks. It's highly doubtful that they're going to be any more successful in doing that if they're organised abroad or being competent enough to actually screen all that stuff out at the border. And what would be the point anyway? Great Britain is arguably already a European hotspot for this sort of thing. And indeed, arguably it should be Europe who's imposing visa restrictions on the UK to stop it exporting this sort of thing. Apart from they can't, because of the rules that were already negotiated with the EU. I mean, practically, of course, it's mostly a waste of time. The whole point that we relaxed the borders in the first place was to allow free trade to work better in Europe. This means that if, say, for instance, Britain has a shortage of plumbers, they can come over from Poland and fill the gap in the market. And it's win-win for everybody. But doesn't Britain send £350 million a week to Europe? Well, kinda, but that's like saying that Britain sends £10 billion a week to Parliament. On paper, it's true. It's just not very honest. And once you cut through all the obvious manipulation of the figures, it drops to about half of that. But you may still well say, doesn't the EU cost us £150 million a week? Well, okay, let's say there are 75 million Brits. That means that the average Brit pays about £2 a week, or £100 per year. That means that Europe costs your average Brit about as much as a TV license. Is that really deal-breakingly expensive? And just so you know, things that might look normal in Britain can look crazy from everywhere else. Most Americans who I've ever talked to are just dumbstruck at the very idea that you have to pay the government a tax to own a television. Nonetheless, in the event of a Brexit, me, as a scientist who's worked in the US, the UK, Germany, France and the Czech Republic, would now need, just like, say, for instance, the Polish plumbers, would need a visa or similar to go work in Europe. It would be a royal pain in the arse. It's a barrier to trade. And I don't even know how this would affect some of the European-funded nuclear reactors at which I do most of my research. And then, of course, what about the Brits who bought their cheap retirement homes in Spain? Again, where previously there was stability, there will be uncertainty. For what tangible gain? If you're just voting exit because it feels good, I understand your protest vote. But in practice, it's just going to be a very costly change for Britain to something that is more or less exactly the same as it was in the first place. After all, to a very real extent, Britain can't leave. Britain, England, Great Britain, whatever, doesn't matter, is a set of islands off the coast of Europe, and geographically, it's not going anywhere. The majority of the trade will still be done with the European Union, and that will have to be governed by rules. Unless you've got some massive beef with those rules as they are at present, which as far as I can tell is almost no one, then what the hell is the point? You're just changing one set of trading laws for a bloc to another set of trading laws for the bloc, all while throwing a massive wrench into the works of any UK company that trades with anywhere else in the world, and vice versa. And someone's got to do all of that work. That's going to cost money. That transition from one set of rules to another almost identical set of rules will cost a fortune in lost trade and disruption and so on. None of this really makes any difference anyway. Britain's not just geographically close to Europe, it's financially close to Europe. If Europe's going down, it doesn't matter if Britain is in or out. Britain's going down with it. Changing the trade rules might make you feel better, but fundamentally it won't change the close financial proximity of Britain and its trade with Europe. I mean, really, what is all this for? For England to show Europe that electing Prime Minister Dead Pig Defiler wasn't the only dumbass thing its electorate could do. Look, I hate Europe as much as anyone, but that doesn't mean in the cost-benefits analysis that leaving is the best option. I mean, remember how I started this video, with Scotland voting to leave. How did that make you feel? That the Scottish, on the grand scale of things, a bit player, were about to break up the United Kingdom, just because they hated the English. I mean, sure, the Scots hate the English and the English hate the French and so forth. Indeed, you get jokes in France like, don't you hate the Germans? To which the answer is, of course, no, we're only at war with Germany for 6 or so years. The unspoken punchline being we've been at war with England for most of the last 1,000 years. But as with many things, many a true word spoken, or in this case, not spoken, in jest. The natural state of Europe is war. My shelves are replete with a technological symphony of weapons of war made by Europeans to kill each other. I mean, just to put this into perspective, World War II alone, England and America dropped 1.5 megatons of bombs on Germany. 1.5 million tons of bombs on Germany. And that's just what they did with the planes. And I'm going to go to Germany next week and give a talk. Both of my parents experienced first-hand bombing in World War II. Indeed, it was my dad's earliest memory. Sadly, he died of cancer recently, and that was mostly thanks to the NHS and the UK's cancer survival rate being some of the lowest in Europe. And yeah, I did some interviews with my dad before he died and how he felt about this. And oddly, he predicted exactly the incompetence that actually killed him.
In the course of all of this, they managed to give me, or get infected, because they were taking time over stenting some of these ducts. The fluid, the biliary fluid gets trapped, the bile gets trapped, and then slowly goes off and festers, and you finish up with an infection. And I had 2 nights where I had a chronically high temperature, I had the shakes, I had everything else. Now again, this should never be allowed to get to that stage while you're in hospital.
Yeah. There's a lot of bureaucratic inefficiency to worry about in Europe, but there's also a hell of a lot of putting your own house in order before you get too vocal about how terrible it is for the TV license costs of the inefficiencies of Europe. Anyway, over the last 70 or so years of peace, Europe has flourished. It has become much more technologically advanced. The living standards have skyrocketed, but it's also become much more fragile. In the past few weeks, there has been a blockade of some refineries in France, which have just showed how quickly a modern first world country can be brought to its knees by a handful of disgruntled truckers. Same thing happened in England about a decade or so ago, and with an infrastructure this fragile, in a shooting war, you're not looking at months for things to go to pieces, you're looking at days. England, however, is far more strategically vulnerable. It always has been. Without imports, England can support a population of maybe 20 million, and that's forgetting your widescreen TV, that's living the agrarian life. Historically, this is why Britain had to rule the waves, because if it didn't, a naval blockade of the country could bring about its defeat by starvation. Which is why the Navy had something called the 2-power standard, that Britain needed a navy at least as big as the next 2 navies in the world. Well, it ain't like that anymore. Wars are born of instability, and at its simplest, can anyone dispute of all the things that the UK could do, that leaving the EU would be a step towards instability in Europe, one of the largest pieces of the European Union pulling out. It would be a step towards a more polarized Europe. There would be us, and there would be them, a step towards old Europe. One tiny step to be sure, but nonetheless one step closer. The old Europe that took the largest armed conflict in history, that we should never, under any circumstances, forget the lessons of history, lest we be doomed to repeat them. Frankly, much though I despise the ineptitude of the European Union, all that bureaucracy and red tape buys us a portion of stability and security, which, the extortionate but quantifiable price of a TV license per year, and when compared to the historical European way of resolving such problems, is cheap at the price. Now, for me, this was a fairly simple call of the lesser of 2 evils. However, if you look at the polls, this is a pretty close contest in Britain. So I'd be grateful whether you agree or disagree with this message if you'd share it where you can. Thank you.
So the Germans then shifted from daylight bombing to the Blitz, and I was born during the Blitz. And the Blitz ended finally when the Germans decided that they wouldn't want to fight us at all, they'd go and attack the Russians instead, and they shifted all their aircraft across.